Alright, so I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, and I think I want to try to incorporate some stand-up into my videos. So, let me try this out on you guys. Which Pokemon is most likely to be a pirate? Arbok. Okay, I get it. What is going on, guys? So today we are back with another video. Today we're actually going to be diving a little bit deeper by doing a versus video on two Pokemon that play very, very similar roles in this cup. And both Pokemon, I don't see too many people talking about one of them, but very similar role to the one that a lot of people are talking about. And depending on what your situation is, could possibly be a better choice, but I'll leave that up to you guys. So today we're actually going to be looking at Scyther and Masquerain here. So Scyther actually has base stats of 218 on attack, 170 defense, and 172 on stamina. Masquerain actually clocking in at a 192 on attack, 150 defense, and 172 on stamina there as well. So the way this actually ends up working out is Masquerain actually has 8.3% more bulk than Scyther, as well as having a higher stat product, actually 4.1% higher than directly compared to Scyther. It actually ends up working out pretty interesting here, but we're actually going to see a little bit of how these base stats can actually affect some of the matchups that these two Pokemon have. And to do that, we're actually going to use these movesets right here. We're going to go with Air Slash, Aerial Ace, and X Scissor for our Scyther there, while we do maintain the Air Slash, Ominous Wind, and Silver Wind for Masquerain. Now, we've already done a deep dive on Masquerain. If you haven't checked that out, definitely go check that out for a little bit more in-depth analysis on Masquerain itself. We have not done one for Scyther. If you guys are at all interested in that, make sure that you drop that name down in the comments, and we will add it to the spreadsheet like I normally do. But currently, Scyther, we haven't done one, so I'm kind of just going on good faith that PvPoke has chosen Air Slash, Aerial Ace, and X Scissor as the best possible moveset. Just keep that in mind that I haven't done too far into that as to what it could have been. Saved it. So first thing we're actually going to look at here is we're actually going to take a look at our shields. And to do that, we're actually going to look at the entire cup. We're actually going to put both of these Pokemon up against every single matchup possible inside of the Jungle Cup and look at how we fare in some different shield scenarios. So first one that we have here is a 0 versus 0, which is where I don't have any shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields. We actually have a tie right off the bat with a 42.5% for both Scyther and Masquerain. Our next shield scenario is a 2 versus 0, which is where I have 2 shields this time, but my opponent doesn't have any. We actually end up with a 91.8% on Scyther with a 93.3% on Masquerain, so we definitely do have to give a point to Masquerain there. Our next shield scenario is 0 versus 2, which is where I don't have any shields this time, but my opponent does have both shields. We end up with a 6.7% on Scyther and a 7.5% on Masquerain, so we definitely do need to give the credit to Masquerain there. Our next shield scenario is the 2 versus 2, which is where I have both shields and my opponent has both shields this time. We actually have a tie here again, a 57.5% for both Scyther and Masquerain. Now, some interesting picks here. Basically, both of these Pokemon are going to be targeting a lot of the bug or grass type Pokemon. Considering that we do have a lot of flying type moves, it does make it an easy case to go after those grass type Pokemon. And a lot of the bug type Pokemon do get kind of roped in there as well. Basically, the things that we're going to try to avoid, since we do both carry flying typing, we are bug and flying. We do need to avoid those electric type Pokemon pretty hardcore, and especially the rock types even more, because we do have a super duper weakness to the rock typing. It's going to be a pretty big feat to follow if we try to go up against that. So with our main goal of targeting the grass types and trying to avoid the rock types, we kind of start to have what role that we want to play with these two Pokemon here, which is what's going to carry us into the meta, which we're actually going to talk about with some shield situations here again. So going up against the top 22 meta pick Pokemon out of the actual entire Jungle Cup, in the 0 versus 0 shield situation, we actually end up with a 40.9 for Scyther with a 36.4 for Masquerain. So right there off the bat, we're going to give a point to Scyther. Next, we have the 1 versus 0. Okay, that sounds a little different. Let me explain. So in the meta, these are probably going to be the most relevant Pokemon that you're going to see in a real world scenario. So let's throw some real world shield situations out there as well. So when we do 1 versus 0 or 0 versus 1, either way, we're basically trying to say that I'm either going to use only 1 shield for this Pokemon, or I'm going to use 0 shields and my opponent is going to get to use a shield, because you're more likely to encounter that shield scenario rather than the 0 versus 2 or the 2 versus 0. So in a real world scenario, a 1 versus 0, we actually end up with a 63.6 on Scyther with a 72.7 on Masquerain. So we have to give that point to Masquerain there. In our 0 versus 1, we actually end up with an 18.2% on both Pokemon. So we're tied there. And then lastly, we have the 1 versus 1 shield scenario, which is where, I would use 1 shield, my opponent would have 1 shield as well. We do actually end up with another tie, a 36.4. So as you can already kind of see, there is a lot of matchups that just end up coming to a head in the exact same fashion. But I'm kind of curious, even though we tie in a lot of these shield situations, which one is just flat out preferred? So to figure that out, we do actually have a spreadsheet today, just like we went over yesterday with the Magneton and Magnezone. We're going to do that exact same spreadsheet here, except we're going to tailor it for our Scyther and our Masquerain. So if you didn't watch yesterday's video, I'll give you a quick recap of how the spreadsheet works. Basically at the top we do have Scyther and Masquerain. We have our 0 versus 0 shield situation. This is up against the entire cup, by the way. We do have 2 sheets, 1 for cup and 1 for the meta. We'll go through the cup first since it's the longer of the 2. As you can see, we do have some green and red battle ratings here. So the battle rating is a numerical value that depicts how good that Pokemon is up against another Pokemon. So Abomasnow, for example, Scyther versus Abomasnow ends up with a battle rating of 777, which means that Scyther actually wins that matchup. In the Masquerain, it actually ends up with an 801, which means that Masquerain actually performs better than Scyther up against Abomasnow, which actually leads us to the results column, which actually tells us Masquerain actually ends up doing better. So there are several different things that you need to note here. One, a 500 equals a plain out tie, okay? If both Pokemon have the exact same battle rating, it's considered just a flat out tie. Neither Pokemon is better nor worse than its counterpart. But even if both Pokemon win or if both Pokemon lose, you still have a green or red color generally. So like in the Abomasnow, both Pokemon win with a battle rating above 500, but Masquerain actually does a little bit better, which is why Masquerain's is colored green. The colors do not depict on win or loss, it's literally on who does better versus the other Pokemon. So, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see that we do have a results at the very bottom in an entire row by itself. You can see that Scyther has a 56 underneath its name, which actually just ends up meaning that 56 times Scyther is actually preferred over Masquerain, flat out. Masquerain actually ends up having 72, which means that Masquerain is actually preferred 72 times out of the entire cup. So in the 0 versus 0 shield scenario, Masquerain is actually the one that we would probably want to look at here. It does better in the 0 versus 0. So if you scroll even further to the right, you can see there, we're actually going to just take a look. You can see Scyther has a 61 in the 0 versus 2, where Masquerain only has 44. So I would bet to say that Scyther is going to be the more aggressive one here when we don't have shields. When we're just completely out of shields and our opponent has some, we actually end up doing a lot better as Scyther, which will actually end up coming back to this when we get into the meta section. So then we scroll even further to the right, we do have our 2 versus 0, which you can see Scyther has a 50, whereas Masquerain has a 82. Then we scroll even further to the right, you can see that in the 2 versus 2, Scyther has a 49, but Masquerain has the 76 there. So let's recall really fast, in the 2 versus 2 shield scenarios, it was a 57.5 tie for both Scyther and Masquerain. So if you were to go through each and every one of these simulations, you would find that Scyther and Masquerain both have 57.7% of their matches 500 or above. But what it actually ends up meaning is that Masquerain, if you look even deeper into the numbers, Masquerain actually still performs better than Scyther. Even though they win the same amount of matchups, Masquerain definitely does better. So let's actually switch over to the meta side here. So the meta side works almost exactly the same, except the movesets are chosen for these 22 meta Pokemon. In the other section, they're not chosen, they're actually auto-generated from PvPoke and chosen to be the best case scenario up against our subjects. So if that Pokemon had a rock type move, it definitely prioritizes that over any other moves. Then if it has something like either a fire move or anything else that would be super effective up against our subjects, it then in turn prioritizes that next, and then so on and so forth until it just doesn't have any priority. But here, these are actually predefined movesets, and these are defined by PvPoke inside of their meta section. So let's take a look here again. You can see Scyther, Masquerain at the top in the 0 versus 0. Up against each and every one of these Pokemon, you can see Scyther actually has 8 wins. Masquerain has 10. And you're thinking, wait a minute, Atticus, that doesn't make sense. 10 plus 8 is only 18. You said 22 Pokemon. What's up with that? Okay, let's take a look here. So if you look closely, Ivysaur and Magneton and Masquerain and Scyther all end up with even matchups. So what that actually means is that it doesn't actually matter which Pokemon that you use in that scenario. Up against the Ivysaur, you can see both Pokemon end with a battle rating of 851. So they're both completely fine. You can use either one of them up against Ivysaur, neither one has an advantage. Outside of those that are even, Masquerain definitely starts to take the lead there. So now let's switch over and we'll scroll further to the right. We'll go to the 0 versus 1. You can see Scyther here has 9 wins this time, where Masquerain only has 7. So looking a little closer here, you can see Scyther is preferred in the Beedrill, the Breloom, the Golem, the Ivysaur, Magnezone, Masquerain, Pidgeot, Raichu, Venusaur, and then that's about it. Masquerain, though, is preferred in Credilli, Fortress, Graveler, Heracross, Scizor, Venomoth, and then Victreebel. And then everything else is even. So here again, when we're actually down on shields, if we're at a disadvantaged situation when it comes to our shields, Scyther ends up doing better. Hold that thought for just a quick second. So then, of course, if you scroll even further to the right, you get the 1 versus 0. You can see Masquerain ends up taking it there with 11 points versus Scyther only having 9. And then in the 1 versus 1, you can see Masquerain has 12, where Scyther only has 6. So I do highly encourage you to actually check out the spreadsheet to look through and kind of pick through some of the numbers to see if you are considering running either Masquerain or Scyther. I definitely feel like you should go through some of the numbers and try to figure out, like, oh, this matchup, it stands out. Like, if anything looks funny, it's probably worth looking a little bit deeper into. If it's too good to be true, I've found that it's usually actually too good to be true. So if we think about this point that we've talked about, where when shields are down, Scyther ends up doing a whole lot better. That seems really interesting, but if you think back to these base stats, it makes a whole lot of sense. With a 218 on attack for Scyther and a 192 for Masquerain, I would actually go to say that Scyther, even though they're both running Air Slash, the exact same fast move, I would bet that against a lot of Pokemon, you actually end up having a higher actual damage with Air Slash, because Air Slash has a base power, and then that actually gets chunked into a damage formula with our attack stat here. And because we do have a higher attack stat with Scyther, we end up being more attack driven. So I would say that the Pokemon that don't have higher bulk and don't do as well unless they have shields, Scyther ends up having a lot higher battle rating in those matchups. Even though it won't probably flat out win against those Pokemon, it still ends up performing better than the Masquerain here with a lower attack. So just something to keep in mind if you're the type of person that probably is going to use this role as like a secondary or even a closer type role. Like if the way I like to look at teams is like I have an opener, I have a closer, and then I have that flex or mid spot. So depending on how you want to use that Pokemon, if it's going to be your flex or if it's going to be your mid, possibly when shields are down, Scyther could do a little bit better. But if you're planning on using it as your opener or possibly even that flex spot with an even better closer, maybe Masquerain would do a little bit better for you. It's definitely going to be up to the rest of your team, of course, but both Pokemon do have a lot of merit here, but final judgment, Masquerain's actually going to take it. Even though I love Scyther to death, he's going to be like, I would say Heracross is probably my favorite bug, and then Scyther's probably second. I'd go as far to say that. And that's pretty bold. Anyways, so even though that Scyther is just an amazing, can do no wrong creature, Masquerain's gonna take it for this one, unfortunately. So that is actually gonna be what my thoughts are on both Scyther and Masquerain, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for watching. Let's go ahead and just roll that end of video footage. Well, you've made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you do have any ideas for content, please drop them down in the comments below. I'll be happy to look at those for you guys. Of course, if you want to join my personal Discord, get to talking to some people that have a similar outlook as myself, definitely go down into the description, join that Discord there. If you want to become a Patreon, there is a link down in the description for that as well. My outlook on Patreon is I don't want to put anything behind a paywall. This is what I do. You guys get every bit of what I make, and I don't want to limit that to someone else just because they can't pay for something. I didn't think that was fair. If you want to be a Patreon, just know that you're literally doing it from the kindness of your heart, wanting to support me, and I appreciate that. You don't even understand how much. There are a couple of other options if you would like to join the community here on YouTube. It's very similar to a Twitch-like subscription where it's a dollar amount per month depending on where you live. And then that monthly fee basically gets funneled to me every month. And you do get a couple of special perks here on YouTube, like some badges and some emojis or whatever. Honestly, I think those are only for live streaming. So that may not be the way that most people want to go, but that's an option if you want to. Other than that, if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, that link is actually going to be down in the description as well. And until our next video, guys, that should be it. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out. And until our next video, I will catch you then.